What's up, Guru Nation? Let's demystify clinical research. Hey, Guru Nation, welcome back. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Really means a lot to me. We're going back and redoing an oldie but goodie, and it's what is the difference? This is for all you newbies, but there's probably some little Easter eggs in here for the more experienced researchers out there. I'm going to try to go off topic a little bit and then come back to make a concise 20-minute or less video. But CRC versus CRA, people get confused, and understandably so. This industry is so secretive. I'm doing my best to demystify it. But these are the two most common positions in this industry. These are, if this industry had a household name, it would be CRC or CRA, and people get them confused all the time. And so let's just start with Clinical Research Coordinator, which is CRC. Clinical Research Coordinator, you can debate whether it's entry level or not. I know a lot of people out there are going to say, well, CRC is not entry level. I agree. But as a business owner, as a site owner since 2005, I have hired almost 100% research naive entry-level study coordinators. Now, they don't start out as coordinators. They start out under me or under one of my other coordinators as a research assistant. And I think this is where CRA gets mixed up for people, because CRA, which we're going to get to in a little bit, the CRA most people think about is clinical research associate. But in the context of a research site, CRA is actually clinical research assistant. So I never will refer to an assistant as a CRA because that's confusing. They're just research assistants at the site level. But for all intents and purposes, when I hire somebody, it's to get them up to speed to be a coordinator in 3, 4, 5 months. Our CRC Academy is a 3-month program, and then it's followed by an internship of 1 to 3 months. So somewhere around 3 to 6 months working at a site, especially a small site, you will get the hang of being a CRC. I'll keep interviewing them on my show. My own employees come on from time to time so you can see what CRC does, but they're more or less entry level in my opinion. Now, once you have experience as a CRC, you can go on to get CRA roles. You can go on to be project managers. You can go on to be medical writers. You can go on to be in-house CRAs. You can go on to be anything really you can think of. Site directors, site owners. But let's define what a clinical research coordinator is. So the first thing is they work at sites. The next thing is they have patient interaction. That's the main differentiating between a clinical research coordinator and a clinical research associate is clinical research coordinators have patient interaction. So half of the time they are dealing with patients. The other half of the time they're dealing with the data, the paperwork, the regulatory, they're interacting with the monitors, which are CRAs. They're interacting with various people from sponsors. It all is industry focused, but roughly half of their time is patient focused. That's the main difference. Clinical research associates, which we'll get to later, they have zero patient interaction. So I know a lot of people that want to join my CRA Academy. They call me, they ask questions. Links are underneath, by the way, to all these academies. They call me, they ask questions. They say, you know what? I'm a foreign medical doctor. I really want to be a CRA because I love interacting with patients. And I tell them, that's great. You can be a CRA, but you're in it for the wrong reason, because as a CRA, I hope you realize you don't have patient interaction. Matter of fact, a lot of CRAs that used to be CRCs, yes, the pay is better, but they miss that patient interaction. So a lot of times the CRAs will come back to being coordinators because they miss that patient interaction. So that was like a key thing to keep in mind is patient interaction. CRCs interact with patients. CRAs, which are monitors, they interact with sponsors, with coordinators, and with principal investigators. Another thing to keep in mind, for the majority of the cases, 90% or more, clinical research coordinators are employed by clinical research sites, investigative sites, where the principal investigator, whoever that person is, they are the ones responsible for the conduct of their study. So as a CRC, your boss is your principal investigator, and if somebody else owns your clinic and the company you work for, then you have two bosses. You have your PI and whoever owns your clinic. Now, what makes this confusing, I said 90% of the time it's not confusing at all. Research sites employ study coordinators. There are cases where CROs own sites, and I'm making this video in May of 2023. It'll be interesting to see the trend over the next decade, because I believe as site networks slowly start evolving into contract research organizations, which are those are the companies that hire clinical research associates, I believe they're going to start acquiring sites and site networks. We're already seeing this happen. So you're going to see a world where a CRC could actually work for a CRO. It's just going to add more to the confusion. So I hope this video stands the test of time and you could differentiate CRC versus CRA in one, the CRC reports to the principal investigator primarily, and two, the CRC has patient interaction. CRA reports to their project manager or their lead CRA or their clinical trial manager, reports to the sponsor, does not report to the PI. They do work with the principal investigators, but they are monitoring the principal investigators. So now that I've kind of given a macro overview of the difference between a CRC and a CRA, let's get into some of the details. Like I said, patient interaction. So actually doing the informed consent. If you don't know what this is, go watch my comprehensive guide to a clinical research screening visit. You will see informed consent's a huge part and the most important part of study participation. As a CRC, you will be doing a lot of informed consents. You will also be doing all the data collection for your study. So whatever protocol you're working on, whatever protocol your principal investigator has delegated you to do as the CRC, and whatever duties they delegated you to do as the CRC, here's a hint, they delegate you to do the majority of them that they're allowed to do. The part that they're not allowed to delegate are physical exams. Those require licenses in the states that you are in. Lab reviews, those obviously require an MD or an NP or a principal investigator to have safety oversight. They can't delegate everything. They can't delegate signing off on the electronic data capture system. They can't delegate signing the 1572. If you don't know what these things are, watch the other video on regulatory. We're going to do one on regulatory in a nutshell. But point is, the principal investigator will delegate as much as they can to the CRC. This means patient interaction. This means collecting vital signs. This means patient-reported outcomes. This means collecting adverse events. This means documenting serious adverse events. This does not mean assessing the adverse events and serious adverse events. Only a qualified medically trained professional can assess an SAE and an AE. But collecting the data, at the end of the day, what is research? Research is just collecting some data and a lot of data for sponsors. So anything you can imagine, if you go on clinicaltrials.gov and just look at any study and you look at the primary endpoints, the secondary endpoints, the study design, if you get your hands on a protocol and you can see the schedule of assessments for a study, the coordinator has their hands in everything. And even if they're not delegated to do something, they are making sure, just like the name says, that it's being coordinated to be done on time, compliant with the protocol, compliant with good clinical practice, as the sponsor would expect, and as the FDA or whatever other regulatory agency would expect. My coordinators that I hire at my sites and that I train, They do everything at the site, from source to data entry to queries to regulatory to patient recruitment to pre-screening to creating the source documents to assessing to collecting adverse events and serious adverse events, not assessing it, but making sure that the principal investigator is assessing those things as they need to be, because PIs very busy. They're usually MDs. They usually have private practice where they're also treating patients outside of research. They need someone to keep them on track and compliant with the protocol, and they expect the coordinator to be able to do that. And a really good coordinator goes from being told what to do by the PI or by the management to telling others what they need to do. That's the flip. That's the switch that occurs from inexperienced to experienced coordinator, is you go from relying on others to tell you what to do to now you are telling other people, hey, you're coordinating them. Hey, I need you to do this. I need you to be here for this patient visit. You need to do this, this, and that. That's study coordinator. Study coordinator, obviously, the best ones are generalists. The best ones can multitask. The best ones can switch gears flawlessly between patient interactions to sponsor interactions to IRB interactions. They've got their hands on everything. The one thing they probably don't have their hands in, at least the majority of them, are contracts and budgets. So if you're someone that wants to be a coordinator and you say, hey, I love everything, but I keep hearing about these contracts and budgets in research, I don't like it, most of the time you're not going to be doing this as a coordinator. If you choose, and if you are selected because your performance, you've deserved it, would allow your site director to say, hey, this person can be groomed to be a manager at the site, you might start getting your hands on some budgets if you like those kind of things. But basically all aspects of the site are handled by coordinators. Coordinators are considered the backbone of any study because they're the ones, without them, the principal investigators are not going to be recruiting patients. The principal investigators are not going to be the ones handling patient-reported outcomes. The principal investigator is supposed to provide safety oversight. The coordinators do everything else, including sometimes blood draws, including sometimes ECGs. Okay, and if they're not qualified or they don't want to do those things, like not every coordinator wants to draw blood, they coordinate who's going to do it. Okay, did you schedule the phlebotomist at 8:15 because you know that a patient's going to need a blood draw for your study at that time? That's the multitasking that a coordinator has to do. The main benefit of being a CRC, besides learning really all aspects of research, is that every day is different for you. Like, that's probably the most consistent feedback I've received over the last 18 years from all my staff is my job's never the same every day. Every day's different. One day I could be screening for one study. The next day I could be screening for another study. A typical coordinator can handle anywhere from 3 to 7 studies, maybe 10, depending on how complex they are, and across all various stages of that study life cycle. Remember, studies could be enrolling, studies could not be enrolling and be in what's called maintenance period, meaning screening and enrollment is over, but there are patients still in the study. Studies can also be in a closeout mode where all patients have finished, data has been entered, queries have been answered, we're just waiting to close out our site. Studies could be in startup mode where studies are just getting started, we haven't been activated yet as a site, we're nowhere near ready to start screening patients, but there's work activity. And all these things happen simultaneously if you're managing multiple studies as a coordinator. So you could be recruiting one day, doing a maintenance visit another day, doing a closeout visit another day, doing a site selection visit another day. At really busy clinics, you can be doing a lot of these things in the same day. So that's CRC. Now let's jump on to CRA. CRA is the opposite side of this. Not the opposite, but the inverse. Most of the best CRAs have CRC experience. Not all, but most. And those are the ones that really understand and have empathy for the coordinators. CRAs typically do get paid more. CRAs travel. As of 2023, CRAs still travel a lot. That might change by 2033 as more sites start adopting electronic source and electronic regulatory. It may cut down the need of or frequency of interim monitoring visits. But whether it's remote or in person, clinical research associates, also known as monitors, monitor the study. So all that data that the coordinator captures from a study visit for a protocol, the monitor, the CRA, needs to look at that source, needs to verify, this is called source data verification, that it is correct with what is on the EDC system or the electronic data capture system. They also need a source data review. And I did a whole video on interim monitoring visits and what they do. But they also need to make sure that the visit was compliant with the protocol, was compliant with good clinical practice, and was compliant with whatever state, local, or federal regulations apply to that particular site. Whether it's remote or in person, this is what monitors do from a source perspective. From a regulatory perspective, they make sure that all the site's regulatory documents are in order and they are constantly maintained and current. So current medical licenses for all PIs and sub-Is. 1572 current. Latest protocol version is being used by the site. Latest protocol version the site has been trained on. Latest protocol version the site is compliant with. Then it's financial disclosure forms. Are all sub-investigators on the 1572? Have they all signed financial disclosure form? Are they all performing the duties that are on the delegation of duties log? Or is anyone performing something that they're not listed to be on from the delegation of duties log? It's very stressful to be a CRA. If you had to ask me, and I get asked a lot, what's more stressful, CRC or CRA? I think hands down, and the majority of Guru Nation would agree with me, it's CRA is more stressful. Not just because of the travel, but that is not an insignificant part of the reason. But they are the ones, the CRAs, they're the ones responsible for making sure that the site is being compliant with the protocol. And yes, ultimately it's the site's responsibility, it's the PI's responsibility, and it's the coordinator's responsibility. But these sites are busy. The coordinators, like I just said, multitask a lot, switch hats all the time, change gears a lot, and monitors don't really change gears. The only gears monitors change is what sites they're monitoring that day. So the way it works for a CRA is they're usually just given one study, sometimes two. The really experienced ones can handle 3, at the most 4. I've never heard of someone monitoring like 5 protocols simultaneously. I'm sure it's been done, but I can almost guarantee you those are independent contractors and they're not being truthful about how many studies they're monitoring, because you could really only do like 1 to 3 studies max and then have a certain number of sites per protocol. So the typical monitor will have 1 study and maybe 11 sites. And that's as a full-time employee monitor. An independent contractor might have 3 studies, but only have 3 sites per study. Both of those are relatively normal for the contracting CRA versus the full-time employee CRA. It's very stressful because you're dealing with different sites. Every site has their own SOPs, standard operating procedures. Every site uses their own source documents. Some use electronic source, like my sponsor Creo that we use. Check them out. Other sites use other e-source companies. Other sites use paper. Other sites use a mix of these, and that's just the source. Then you get the regulatory. Some sites use REDCap. Some sites use Viva. Some sites use Creo. That all varies. So as a CRA, you have to learn various systems that the sites use not to mention all the systems you have internally as a CRA from most likely your CRO or your sponsor. Whenever there's problems at the site, you're the first person they contact. You're expected to have the answers. You're expected to be empathetic. You're also dealing with sponsors as a CRA who are also complaining to the clinical trial manager, who ultimately passes that complaint down to you as the monitor. Hey, your site is not entering data in the EDC system. Your site has 40 unanswered queries and they're 90 days old or more. Make sure they get them done. So you as a CRA, you're dealing with site complaints, you're dealing with sponsor complaints, you're dealing with internal CRO complaints. A common sponsor complaint that usually gets passed down to CRAs is, my site's not enrolling. Why are these sites not enrolling? Then you got to go talk to the coordinators and the PIs. Well, why are you not enrolling? Then you might have that same conversation about query resolution. Why are you not answering queries fast enough? And that's without dealing with protocol deviations. If you discover protocol deviations, if you discover serious adverse events that have not been documented at the site, you've got retraining. And that's a whole nother aspect of CRAs that goes unappreciated in our industry, is they're the ones training the CRCs or retraining the CRCs. I learned to be a coordinator from my first monitor, and she was tough, but she realized that I was new, and she took me under her wings and showed me everything I needed to know. And she was super strict, but she showed me how to do everything the right way. Nowadays, when we make mistakes, our CRAs are in charge of retraining us. Hey, you did this wrong. In the future, this is how you do it. Sign this training log that I trained you how to do this. There's so many things that could go wrong in a study, and it boils down to the CRA. But they get paid the big bucks, and a lot of people want to be CRAs, but a lot of people want to jump the gun and be a CRA before they put their time in to be a CRC. And nowadays you have other positions like subcategories of CRAs, like you have junior CRAs, you have in-house CRAs, you have clinical research assistants at the CRO level. I know you probably remember me mentioning clinical research assistants at the site level. You have that at the CRO level as well. You have in-house CRAs, you have trial master file specialists. You're dealing with a lot of people as a CRA, but you are not interacting with patients. And this is probably one of the biggest complaints I hear from former CRCs that become CRAs is, hey, I love the money. The travel is cool at first, but then it gets old. But I really miss that site interaction. And a lot of times the CRAs go back to working as coordinators or being site directors or owning their own sites, or they go on to the sponsor level because at the CRO level, they tend to get worked a lot. So that's in a nutshell the difference between CRC and CRA, and really how these two roles interact with one another and what they do as individual job functions. Guru Nation, like, subscribe, comment, share. Let me know what I missed. Catch you guys later. Bye-bye.